It's never fun to lose. I thought we got a pretty good look out of it. But again, I think, we shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. The 17 turnovers got us there. So, yeah, we shouldn't have even been there. But I thought, Kelsey got a look at it. It's unfortunate, but, yeah, on to the next.
Stephanie White, I've had it up to here with you. I've had it up to here. I know you are going to take zero accountability as always.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed one of the most frustrating displays of coaching incompetence in recent WNBA memory, and I'm absolutely sick of pretending like Stephanie White isn't a major problem for this Indiana Fever team. Last night's 81-80 loss to the Dallas Wings wasn't just a disappointing defeat, it was a masterclass in how terrible coaching decisions can completely sabotage a talented roster and waste opportunities that should never slip away.
We fell down 14 points to a team that had 8 wins on the goddamn season. Stop it.
While everyone wants to blame the referees for this disaster, and trust me, the officiating was absolutely garbage, the real culprit sitting right there on the sideline in a Fever uniform, refusing to take any accountability for the systematic failures that cost Indiana a winnable game against one of the worst teams in the league.
Guys, that's on the coach. Look, if you want to continue to defend this coach, go right ahead. My defense of hers, nah. I was thinking earlier today, what would it take for Stephanie White to get me on her side? She'd have to win the whole thing.
Smash that like button and drop Fire White in the comments, because what I'm about to break down will have you questioning how this woman still has a job coaching professional basketball. Let's start with the most glaring issue that nobody seems to want to address, which is Stephanie White's complete inability to prepare her team for crucial stretches of basketball games. The Fever allowed Dallas to go on a 21-3 run in the third quarter at home, against a team that came into the game with 8 wins and 24 losses. Think about that for a second. You're playing in front of your own fans against one of the league's worst teams, and you give up a 21-3 run that basically decides the outcome before the fourth quarter even starts.
I just watched one of the biggest puke fest I've ever seen in my entire life. You know what should never happen? A 21-3 run at home by the opposing team on you, when the opposing team is the Dallas Wings and they're not any good. I mean, seriously, what just happened during this game? Once again, the Indiana Fever come out into a third quarter and they got embarrassed. They got wrecked.
That's not players making mistakes. That's not bad luck. That's coaching malpractice of the highest order. When your team comes out of halftime looking completely unprepared and gets absolutely destroyed for an entire quarter, that falls squarely on the head coach who's supposed to have them ready to compete. The most infuriating part about this coaching disaster is how predictable it's become under Stephanie White's leadership. This isn't the first time the Fever have come out flat in crucial moments. It's not the second time. It's become their calling card under her guidance. Every single game, you can count on Indiana to have at least one quarter where they look completely lost, disorganized, and outmatched by teams they should be dominating.
When we have a coach that allows the Dallas Wings to go on a 19-0 run without making any adjustments, without calling a timeout, Dallas Wings 19-0 run. When we have all of these factors working against us, it's going to be very hard to win games.
Last night, it was a third quarter against Dallas, but we've seen this movie before against Chicago, against Atlanta, against every team that should be begging for mercy against a roster with this much talent. When the same problems keep happening over and over again, you can't blame the players anymore. You have to look at the coaching staff that's failing to put them in position to succeed. What makes this even more maddening is listening to Stephanie White's post-game press conference where she managed to blame everyone and everything except her own coaching for this embarrassing loss. She talked about turnovers, she complained about the officiating, she mentioned that all their point guards are injured, she threw every excuse at the wall hoping something would stick. But what you didn't hear was a single moment of accountability where she admitted that maybe, just maybe, her coaching decisions contributed to this disaster. When a reporter asked what went wrong during that devastating third quarter run, White immediately started talking about defensive attention to detail and players doing uncharacteristic things, completely deflecting from her own responsibility to have the team prepared and organized.
Let's see if Stephanie White takes any accountability for how this game played out. And we know she probably won't.
Just had a lead in the middle of the third quarter, and then that big Dallas run was the difference. What did you see go sideways in that stretch?
Well, I didn't think our attention to detail on defense was very good. They got loose for some easy ones. We started fouling, getting to the free throw line, and turning the ball over. I mean, there were moments where, there's no transition defense for turnovers for scores. And, we had multiple in a row. I mean, 27 points off of turnovers. And, I felt like our group did some uncharacteristic things with the ball in our hands, and it led to easy buckets.
The excuses are becoming more insulting than the actual coaching performance, because at least bad coaching can be fixed with better preparation and adjustments. But when a coach refuses to acknowledge their mistakes and continues making the same errors week after week, that's when you know you have a fundamental leadership problem that goes beyond X's and O's.
Is any of this your fault, Stephanie White? Is any of this your fault? Or are you about to sit here and pass the buck to each player individually to make it seem like you have no part in this? This is disgusting.
Stephanie White keeps talking about players doing uncharacteristic things, but these aren't uncharacteristic at all. They're exactly the same problems we've been seeing all season long. Aliyah Boston still doesn't know how to establish position in the post. Kelsey Mitchell still over dribbles and gets tunnel vision. Natasha Howard still tries to bring the ball up court like she's a point guard. These aren't new issues. They're coaching failures that have been ignored for months.
And then we have quarters and halves where we come out not ready to play. We come out making no adjustments. We come out slow, lethargic. The Dallas Wings went on a 19-0 run, and we're sitting there. Wait, did we call a timeout? Was there a timeout called during this 12-0 run? No, there wasn't. Oh, okay. Just making sure. 12-0 run turned into a 19-0 run, turned into a 21-3 run. Oh, very interesting.
The timeout management in the final seconds perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with Stephanie White's game management and decision-making process. With the Fever down 1 point and having a chance to win the game, White waited until there was 1.7 seconds left on the clock before calling timeout, basically eliminating any possibility of running a proper play or getting a good look at the basket. Any competent coach calls that timeout with at least 3 or 4 seconds remaining, giving their team multiple options and the ability to actually execute something meaningful. Instead, she waited until the absolute last possible moment and forced Kelsey Mitchell into a desperation heave that had no chance of going in. That's not unlucky. That's poor coaching that directly contributed to losing a winnable basketball game. But the timeout disaster was just a cherry on top of a coaching performance that featured terrible rotations, questionable substitution patterns, and a complete inability to make adjustments when Dallas started taking control of the game.
Chloe Bibby, 11 points in 12 minutes, and you can bet your ass she got hot, and Stephanie White took her out. I mean, like clockwork.
You coaching them to lose to sorry teams, bruh. Y'all ain't going to no playoffs with your mentality, bruh, because you think your way is the best way, bruh. Look, like I said, you're throwing the games, and the organization, they in on it too. You hear me? We already know that y'all can't even win without CC like that, to be honest, because if y'all could, y'all would have been winning.
Chloe Bibby came off the bench and immediately hit 3 3-pointers in the first half, showing exactly the kind of energy and shooting the Fever needed to separate themselves from a struggling Wings team. How did Stephanie White reward this excellent performance? By barely playing Bibby in the second half and essentially removing her from the rotation when Indiana needed scoring the most? It's the kind of rotation management that makes you wonder if the coach is actually watching the same game as everyone else in the arena. The defensive schemes were equally baffling as Stephanie White, who's supposed to be some kind of defensive guru according to her supporters, watched her team get absolutely torched by players who shouldn't be able to score freely against any competent defensive system. Lee Uweru, a backup center who barely plays meaningful minutes for Dallas, came off the bench and dominated Aliyah Boston in the paint like she was playing against high school competition.
Aliyah Boston, 14 points, 5 boards. She got dominated by Lee from 3. Leah Uru dominated AB. Leah Uru dropped 20 points on AB's head top.
Didn't you say you were turning Aliyah Boston into the Joker and being this hub, playing at the top of the key, being a hub and a decision maker? Why wasn't she hubbing her ass around and making plays and dominating the backup big Lee Ureru who tore her ass up.
When your supposed defensive anchor is getting worked over by a bench player from one of the league's worst teams, that's a coaching problem that needs immediate attention and adjustments. Instead, White just watched it happen and hoped things would magically improve without making any meaningful changes. The most telling moment of the entire post-game press conference came when White was asked about taking accountability for the team's struggles.
Kind of just described all this, but the turnovers, only 15 assists. What kind of led to the disorganization that you saw on the offensive end tonight?
Well, all of our point guards are injured. I think that's the first thing. And again, it's one of those things. Dallas turned up the pressure. I mean, defensively, they made it a little bit more difficult for us to bring down the ball and initiate offense, and became a little bit more disruptive. And we're working Odyssey into what we do, but still, it's tough because point guards are the ones who get you organized. And there were times where we weren't organized. There were times where we were over dribbling.
She couldn't even acknowledge that maybe her coaching has something to do with the team's poor performance. Instead, she chose to blame circumstances and opponents for problems that clearly stem from preparation and game management issues. When your team gives up 27 points off turnovers and you respond by talking about how Dallas made things difficult, you're basically admitting that you had no plan for dealing with pressure. You're also admitting that you couldn't make the adjustments necessary to stop the bleeding. Oh, but wait, it gets even better. White had the audacity to say that players were doing uncharacteristic things, as if we haven't been watching the same garbage all season long. Uncharacteristic? Lady, are you watching the same games as the rest of us? Aliyah Boston has been playing the exact same way all year, camping at the top of the key instead of establishing post position like a legitimate center should. Kelsey Mitchell has been over-dribbling since day one, treating the basketball like it's glued to her hands. Natasha Howard has been trying to run point guard duties since the season started, looking lost every time she touches the ball outside the paint. These aren't uncharacteristic behaviors. These are systematic coaching failures that have been ignored for months while White pretends like everything is fine. This pattern of excuse-making and deflection has become the defining characteristic of Stephanie White's tenure as head coach. It's exactly why this team keeps underperforming despite having one of the most talented rosters in the league. Every loss comes with a new set of explanations about why it wasn't really her fault. Whether it's injuries, officiating, or players not executing properly, there's always someone else to blame. But here's a revolutionary concept for Coach White. Good coaches find ways to win despite those challenges. They make adjustments that put their players in position to succeed. They take responsibility when their decisions don't work out. White does none of those things. Instead, she chooses to pass the buck and hope that talent alone will eventually bail her out of situations that better coaching could have prevented entirely. The nerve of this woman to sit in that press conference and act like she's some kind of victim of circumstances is absolutely mind-blowing. You want to talk about uncharacteristic? How about a professional basketball coach who refuses to acknowledge her own mistakes? How about a supposed defensive guru whose team just gave up 81 points to a Dallas squad that couldn't score on a middle school team most nights? How about someone who gets paid to make strategic decisions but consistently makes choices that hurt her team's chances of winning? That's what's truly uncharacteristic for someone who's supposed to be operating at the highest level of women's professional basketball. The offensive execution in crunch time perfectly illustrated White's inability to design plays that maximize her team's strengths and put pressure on opposing defenses. With the game on the line and needing a basket to tie or take the lead, the Fever ran absolutely nothing resembling an organized offensive set. Kelsey Mitchell ended up dribbling sideways for several seconds before launching a contested three-pointer that never had a realistic chance of going in. That's not players failing to execute. That's a coaching staff that failed to prepare proper end-of-game scenarios and left their best players to figure things out on their own when it mattered most. But sure, let's blame the players for not being telepathic enough to read White's mind about what plays she wanted them to run. Maybe if she actually drew up something coherent instead of hoping Mitchell would magically create a miracle, the outcome might have been different. The fact that Indiana's best offensive option in a crucial moment was give the ball to Kelsey and pray tells you everything you need to know about the level of preparation and strategic thinking coming from the coaching staff. This is professional basketball, not a pickup game at the local gym, yet White's end-of-game management would make a high school JV coach embarrassed. What makes this coaching failure even more inexcusable is that the Fever were playing at home against a Dallas team that came in having lost 5 straight games. This Dallas team desperately needed someone to hand them a victory. This should have been the kind of game where superior preparation and coaching creates a comfortable margin early and maintains it throughout the contest. Instead, Indiana played down to their competition. They allowed an inferior team to dictate the pace and style of play. They ultimately lost a game that should have been a routine victory for any competently coached team with championship aspirations. And let's not forget the beautiful irony of White calling this Dallas team really well coached while simultaneously getting outcoached by them in her own building. Chris Cocklanes, a coach most people couldn't pick out of a lineup, just walked into Gamebridge Fieldhouse and gave Stephanie White a masterclass in game management and strategic adjustments. If that doesn't embarrass you as a professional coach, then maybe it's time to find a new profession. The fact that White can sit there with a straight face and compliment Dallas's coaching after getting worked over by them shows just how out of touch she is with reality. The roster construction and utilization issues go beyond just one game and represent a fundamental misunderstanding of how to maximize the talent available on this Indiana team. Stephanie White continues to play players out of position, fails to establish clear roles that allow everyone to succeed, and make substitution decisions that seem designed to disrupt any momentum the team might be building. When Chloe Bibby gets hot from three-point range and immediately gets pulled from the game, when Aliyah Boston continues to struggle in the post without any adjustments to help her succeed, when the defensive schemes consistently leave players in vulnerable positions, those are coaching decisions that directly impact winning and losing. The most frustrating aspect of watching this coaching disaster unfold is knowing that Caitlin Clark will eventually return from her groin injury to find the same systematic problems that existed before she got hurt. All season long, we've heard about how the team has figured out how to play without their superstar and how her injury was somehow a blessing in disguise that allowed other players to develop. But what we actually saw last night was a team that still can't execute basic defensive principles, still turns the ball over at crucial moments, and still lacks the kind of organizational structure that championship teams require. Clark's return might mask some of these problems temporarily, but the underlying coaching issues will remain until someone has the courage to address them directly. The double standard in how Stephanie White gets evaluated compared to other coaches around the league is absolutely mind-boggling when you consider her track record and the resources she's been given to succeed in Indianapolis. This is a coach who ran the Vanderbilt program into the ground and watched her best players transfer out because they couldn't deal with her system and leadership style. Yet somehow she's been given a pass by the media and front office, despite consistently making the same mistakes and showing the same inability to adapt and improve. Other coaches get fired for much less, but White continues to skate by on excuses and lowered expectations that don't match the talent level of her roster. Looking ahead to the rest of the season, the Fever cannot afford to keep dropping winnable games because of coaching decisions that sabotage their playoff positioning and championship aspirations. Every loss to teams like Dallas represents a missed opportunity that could come back to haunt them when seeding and home court advantage get determined. More importantly, these kinds of performances create bad habits and a losing mentality that becomes harder to break the longer it's allowed to continue. Players start expecting to struggle against inferior competition, they lose confidence in crucial moments, and they begin to doubt whether their coaching staff can put them in position to succeed when it matters most. The time has come for the Indiana Fever organization to seriously evaluate whether Stephanie White is the right person to lead this team moving forward, because what we're seeing isn't a coach who's still learning and growing into the position. This is a coach who has shown the same weaknesses consistently, refuses to take accountability for obvious mistakes, and continues to make decisions that hurt her team's chances of winning basketball games. Talent can only carry you so far in professional sports, and eventually you need coaching that enhances that talent rather than limiting it through poor preparation and questionable game management. Last night's loss to Dallas was just the latest example of how coaching incompetence can waste opportunities and frustrate talented players who deserve better leadership. Until the Fever front office recognizes that this is a coaching problem that needs immediate attention, we're going to keep watching the same movie with the same disappointing ending. The players deserve better, the fans deserve better, and Caitlin Clark deserves to return to a team that's actually being coached at a professional level rather than this ongoing disaster that passes for strategic leadership in Indianapolis.